When Ötzi the Iceman, who lived 5,300 years ago, was discovered in a retreating glacier in Europe in 1991, he carried with him some mushroom. On biopsy, it was discovered that Ötzi, poor man, was suffering from whipworms, an intestinal parasite. The mushroom he covered on his waistband was Fungus gyrogorum, or tinder mushroom. Scientific studies have shown that tinder mushroom is effective against parasites. Ötzi also carried poppy seeds with him. Today, morphine and opium from poppy are the most powerful pain medications we have. What strikes me is the longevity of Ötzi's medicines. I'm a registered medical herbalist and health scientist, and stories like Ötzi deeply fascinate me, but they do not surprise me. I have grown up in a healthcare system in Switzerland where traditional plant medicines are a normal and subsidized part of our public healthcare response. In fact, the access to them is guaranteed in the Swiss constitution. So we live, we breathe, and we heal with plants. And you may be wondering what these plant medicines actually are. Well, medicinal plants and plant medicines made from them are natural substances from plants that grow in our environment. And they are produced and also applied according to long-standing medical traditions, including the Western one. And over the millennia, medicinal plants have shown to improve our health, to protect us from disease, to the point where the World Health Organization today says they are really important for modern healthcare. In fact, over 80% of the world population are using plant medicines for their medical interventions. There is a close evolutionary link between humans and plants, and that explains their benefits for us. Humans and plants have co-evolved over the past 2.4 million years. Medicinal plants provide the very building blocks we need to nourish and strengthen and balance our 50 trillion cells and their metabolic pathways. Like a key and key lock, we live, we breathe, and we heal with plants. So if our hormones or our nervous system or our digestion are out of balance, medicinal plants help us to come back to health. Now, this is not a romantic notion. This is underpinned by hard scientific facts. Remember Ötzi and his medicines? We still use them today. When I came to New Zealand 25 years ago, I was really astounded that there is such a lack of choice in our public healthcare system here, particularly when considering the amazingly potent medicinal plants growing in this beautiful environment. Did you know that there is a special type of thyme growing in Central Otago in the South Island of New Zealand that has shown in vitro to kill off the most prevalent bacteria that cause respiratory tract infections, including an antibiotic-resistant one? No wonder that medicines made out of Central Otago thyme are so effective at preventing and treating colds and flus. I grew up in a healthcare system that embraces both traditional plant medicines and the newer man-made pharmaceuticals, and I would like to give you an example how that works. So say I have been stressed and I have been suffering from insomnia, and at some point I need some help. I go and see my GP and I discuss the situation with her, and she offers me two distinct pathways of treatment. The first line of treatment is a non-habit-forming plant medicine that helps to rebalance my circadian rhythm. Maybe a remedy that has valerian and hops in it, or something with passion flower or kava. I'm not going to take up the second treatment on offer, which is synthetic sleeping pills, simply because I am worried about dependency, and also I'm worried about the impact on my daytime memory. However, I do know that if I needed more help, it's there for me to take. I also go and see a registered medical herbalist who will help me to deal with the more underlying issues that have caused the insomnia, and that is important to fully resolve the problem. A couple of years ago, I was back in Switzerland and I took a few photos and I brought them to you today so that I can show you how such an integrated system looks like. So this first photo here is a pharmacy in Lucerne, and you can see the pharmacist giving advice to his clientele on all of the different options available. Now, in such a pharmacy, the sales ratio of plant medicines to pharmaceutical medicines is about 60% to 40%. And in this photo here, we see a pharmacy in Zurich. And you can see how individual plant components are skillfully combined into a therapeutic formula. Now let's come back to New Zealand. So imagine your situation. You are suffering from insomnia, and you too go and see your GP, who would be very helpful in advising you what you could do to mitigate your stress. But when it comes to the actual medications, the options are very limited. So you end up with a script for sleeping pills. You fill the script, and it's been wonderful. You have been able to sleep. It's been a full knockout. So you're very happy about that. But the next morning you do find you're a little bit groggy and your memory is maybe not quite as sharp, but at least you have slept and you keep taking those tablets until one day you realize you now have to fill the script in order to sleep. Now, I am not against modern medicines. Pharmaceuticals are a very important part of modern healthcare. The issue we have is when we use pharmaceuticals as the only choice for all health problems. Since the arrival in the early 20th century of the synthetic manufacture of synthetic pain relief and antibiotics, Western societies have started to believe that all it needs for healing was simply popping a pill. We thought these pills were magical. But if they were, our world would be healthier now. Unfortunately, these quick fixes don't work. They often only address the symptoms rather than the cause. And such an approach also underestimates the physiological needs that our bodies have to fully heal. In New Zealand and globally, unresolved chronic diseases are now the leading cause of premature death. So a pharmaceutical-only system creates gaps of care. We do need to look at other options to integrate. And indeed, the most recent Health and Disability System Review 2020 for New Zealand has made it really clear that we need to shift from a sick care system to a healthcare system. What we need are policies that empower us to look after our health and well-being, and that includes a legitimate access to well-proven traditional plant medicines. Economic savings from such a preventative approach was also one of the reasons why Switzerland integrates them into public health care. So I'm asking you, next time you're feeling under the weather, would you like to try a natural option first? Well, if your answer is yes, then you are one of the billions of people around the world who are already using these options. But this is not possible in Aotearoa. New Zealand is the only country in the OECD that does not have a regulatory framework for the integration of traditional plant medicines. And if you try to find these medicines yourselves, you are faced with a bewildering array of remedies with labels that don't really clearly spell out what they're for. The scope is unclear. It may surprise you. This is because under the current Medicines Act, it is prohibited to state the purpose of a traditional plant medicine, even when that remedy is underpinned by scientific evidence. I would like to give you an example of this. These are two distinct products for cough. They are plant-based, and both contain thyme as the key ingredient. The left one is an Australian product, and in Australia, we do have regulations that support access to traditional plant medicines. So on this label, you can clearly see it is a cough syrup and it is a medicine. It's clear. We know what that is for. On the right label, which is the New Zealand label, we read, relax and soothe a tight chest. What does that mean? How can you, as a consumer, know that actually that is stand-in wording for cough? Over the last few years, since I've been here in New Zealand, one of the most remarkable comments I have heard was that there is supposedly no evidence for plant medicines, and this is a reason why this cannot be integrated into public health care. Now, this reason is, by a country mile, the most absurd. And we do need to talk about what we actually mean by evidence. Randomized controlled trials, or RCTs, are a novel method that has been invented to validate unknown pharmaceutical substances before they are released onto the marketplace. But RCTs are a relatively new and limited method because they are conducted with ideal patients under ideal conditions over a short period of time, and they do not necessarily reflect what happens in real life. Also, RCTs do not provide long-term safety data. And for these reasons, only 15 to 20% of all interventions in public health care are actually underpinned by RCTs. And the rest of the interventions are underpinned by empirical evidence. And empirical evidence is the evidence that we gather in a normal practice setting with real patients over a prolonged period of time. And that remains the backbone of evidence in Western healthcare. And that is the very same type of evidence that we have available for traditional plant medicines. I've been pondering about this issue of supposed lack of evidence for plant medicines for quite some time, and I have investigated a method how we could collate data to underpin plant medicines, and this has become my PhD at the University of Canterbury. My question really was, what could I do to contribute to improve the process so that plant medicines become available in this country? For the method, I used traditional medical knowledge and compared it with modern medical textbooks and scientific research. And what I found was that the evidence was matching. Now, for the traditional medical knowledge, I used a textbook from the 16th century, from the Renaissance, that was written by Taberne Montanus, and he was a German medical doctor and pharmacist. And when we look at St. John's wort, he is saying that St. John's wort is banishing demons and chases away mad fantasies that drive people to despair and gets rid of melancholy. Now, this is quite quaint language, but when we look at the modern textbooks, we do still understand that actually we talk about the same thing. So, St. John's wort in modern clinical use is for depressive moods, anxiety, nervous unrest, and mental exhaustion. And then when we look at the clinical trials, they underpin this evidence for use of St. John's wort. The interesting thing for me is that when traditional plant medicines have gone head-to-head in trial with common synthetic drugs, they have been comparable, safer, and cheaper. And St. John's wort for depression is just one of those examples. So given that there is a body of evidence available, how is it that New Zealand has moved so far away from previously mainstream medicines to become so attached to the pharmaceutical type of medicines? Our healthcare system, like other New Zealand institutions, is suffering from institutional bias. We are yet to decolonize our healthcare system. When at the beginning of the 20th century synthetic drugs started to replace plant medicines, colonial laws and attitudes were firmly enforced in this country. And the spirit of the Tohunga Suppression Act 1907 and the Quackeries Prevention Act 1908 are still alive and have heavily influenced the Medicines Act 1981 and its regulations. Now, when the Natural Health and Supplementary Products Bill was introduced in 2011, this was going to be rectified. But today, we are still no further to have a regulatory framework that allows a legitimate access to these well-established therapeutic plant medicines. What we really need is, I believe, to decolonize our healthcare system. And I really think that our multicultural society is well overdue to recognize other traditional medical practices, be it Ronga Maori or from immigrant populations coming to our shores from China, India, Europe, or other places. And by doing so, not only would we fulfill our domestic obligations under the Treaty of Waitangi, we would also fulfill our international obligations under the World Health Organization Traditional Medicine Strategy, of which, incidentally, New Zealand is a signatory. Health is our biggest wealth. Without vital policy support for a healthcare system that builds a fence at the top of the cliff, many more of us are going to suffer from preventable ill health. My ideal healthcare system is a sustainable one where the right remedy is given to the right person at the right time, one that encourages self-care and one that respects traditional medical practices that have served humans ever since we have been walking on this planet. And Ötzi's medicines have demonstrated that. One that provides vital modern interventions when we are in dire straits. In closing, I encourage you to demand access to the best of both medical worlds so that you too have a choice how you look successfully after your health and that of your loved ones. Thank you.